Lamar Jackson, who is going to win the MVP by all accounts in a few days here in Vegas. He will be named the NFL's most valuable player, which means he will become the first player to ever win 2 MVP awards and not have a Super Bowl on their resume. Every other player in NFL history that has won multiple MVP awards has won a Super Bowl. At this point, there's no guarantee you ever win. You would argue this Ravens team was as good a team as you could want as a quarterback when you look at the defensive numbers, and yet they didn't win. And so Lamar has provided a whole lot of heartburn in big moments as a Raven quarterback. So let us discuss the question: does the Baltimore football team have a Lamar Jackson postseason problem? Ding, 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 ding. Yes, yes, yes. You know that. Now, there's some obtuse people in the back that don't know that, but it's a fact. Look at all of the information that we have. Just use your eyeballs or your ears if you can't see. I've got common denominator, Walmart, and overdose. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to make a train wreck, which is what the Ravens are in big games with Lamar Jackson. And it's not even up for debate. So, Lamar Jackson has everything you could possibly want. Everything you could possibly want. He hasn't been able to figure things out, though, in the playoffs. I remember years ago when I first got into sports radio, there was this great debate about Dan Marino. And there were Dan Marino apologists that used to call sports radio. And they say, well, you never had a good defense in Miami, and he didn't have a running game. And they make all these excuses for Dan Marino not winning. And here we are. It's a different type of quarterback, clearly, but the arguments are similar. The defense system has been activated for Lamar Jackson, and he has been an abject failure in big game after big game after big game. And it's not my opinion. It's a fact. That's just the reality. I mean, now, will he change it? It's up to him. He's the one that has the opportunity to turn things around. But Lamar Jackson's, if you look at his passing numbers in the playoffs, they have been worse than his passing numbers in the regular season. All 4 seasons. It is consistent. All 4 seasons, he has been worse, not just by watching, but by looking at the data from regular season to postseason. His completion percentage is lower from the playoffs as opposed to the regular season. You go by the quarterback rating versus the regular season. You go down every measurable category. Average yards per pass attempt, dramatically worse, almost by a yard. He's almost a yard worse, Lamar Jackson, in the playoffs, that bad. And in the postseason, 4 postseason trips with Baltimore, 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So for every interception, he gives you a touchdown. And he'll throw one into triple coverage like he did against the Kansas City defense there. So the faces have changed around him. The coach is the same, but the offensive coordinators have changed. The personnel that he's throwing the football to has changed. The running backs have changed. The offensive line has changed. The one common denominator, Lamar Jackson in a big game. And I go back to the original point of this, that he's got everything you could possibly want. The quarterback apologists, they're blaming now the other players around Lamar. They're blaming Zayflowers. We'll get to him in a minute. And he was bad in that game, but Lamar was worse. Lamar Jackson was worse in that game. And you go down, you can't blame really the defense. The defense shut out Kansas City in the second half. They held Mahomes out of the end zone. No, not even a field goal. In the second half, they gave you the chance to come back. They held him to 17. That's a workable number. If you're the supposed MVP of the NFL, Lamar Jackson, go out there and win the game. You couldn't do it. You didn't have it in you. You didn't have it in you to win the game. So don't blame the defense. The number one defense in most categories, it was either they or Cleveland. Although my opinion on defensive numbers and defense in general, not that high in the modern NFL, but you get the point. Statistically, they are right up there. Creme de la creme. And they've got some gravitas to them defensively. And yet, with that defense, with the running game and all that, Lamar did a belly whopper in the playoffs. Now, as for Mr. Flowers, we will address the other part of this equation. saw that the wide receiver, Zay Flowers, did not back away from what he did. He effed up multiple times in the game, but he doesn't seem too concerned by any of that. The repercussions of what happened in that particular game. Did a couple of interviews Sunday and Monday. He said, quote, "It's just a moment," Zay Flowers said, "just a moment. It is going to make or break you. I don't plan on letting it break me," he said. All right, well, that's good. So Ravens wide receiver Zay Flowers says he's already moved on. He's already moved on from the fumble into the end zone recovered by Kansas City. He's moved on from that. Do you believe him? Do you believe him? Now, he can say this and try to speak this into existence, but I ain't buying it, right? I am not buying it because legacies are either made or destroyed in postseason moments. That's the way it's always been. The analytical nerds have been unable to change that. See, they haven't been able to change that one. That is still a thing they haven't been able to touch, but that's reality, right? And until Zay Flowers does something to trump what he did in screwing up for Baltimore, then that's on him, and same with Lamar Jackson and whatnot. Now, the good news, as I have learned over the years for players like Lamar Jackson and to a lesser degree Zay Flowers, is that all it takes is one Super Bowl win and all past sins are forgiven. Just one. You win one, and like Peyton Manning, who was part of a couple there, Peyton Manning, who was the Vomit Comet, and he owned the Vomit Comet in big games, Peyton Manning. But people seem to forget about that as time has gone on. They're like, well, he won with the Colts, and he got it done in Denver, so we're all good. We'll just overlook all those other mistakes. And so that's the positive. But getting there, if I gave you $1,000 and I said, all right, we're going to bet on the Ravens within the next 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 years to win the Super Bowl, would you lay the $1,000 on the Ravens? I wouldn't. I don't see them close to winning the Super Bowl. They're very similar to Pittsburgh. They win a lot of regular season games, and then with Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, something inevitably goes sideways, and it's, of course, never his fault. But it's like with Zay Flowers, it's like going to Walmart. There's a spill on aisle 4, right? There's a spill on aisle 4. But again, you can clean that up and one Super Bowl win. All right, last part of this. So the headline, we go over to the Motor City, the Lions losing to the 49ers, getting absolutely poleaxed in the second half as Dan Campbell, who is hiding out, he's like the messenger pigeon for the nerds that are running the Lions. I had an epiphany when I was driving in to the radio station here. And boy, it's a long drive, a lot of gas, burn a lot of fossil fuels driving in here. So I was driving in, I was like, you know what Dan Campbell is? Dan Campbell is a more lovable Dave Roberts, because Dave Roberts with my Dodgers F's up in the playoffs year after year after year. And he's, well, I liked him in that spot. He gives one of those lines. Dan Campbell cost the Lions a date in the Super Bowl, and he's like, oh, yeah, I wouldn't change anything. I like the decision. Because he's been brainwashed, right? He's been indoctrinated. He's a meathead, Dan Campbell, who's been indoctrinated by the nerds, right? And he just repeats whatever they tell him. Somebody needs to give that man an intervention. We like Dan Campbell. He's a good soundbite and all that, but my God. Now, as for the other story with the Lions, Jared Goff. So Jared Goff says he wants to stay in Detroit long term. Now, I don't know anyone that wants to stay in Detroit long term, so that alone is big news that Jared Goff wants to re-up with the Lions. Of course, he wants a ton of money. He'd like a bounty. So what are the chances? What are the chances that Jared Goff and the Lions will reach a deal, that they will go down that road and he will remain as the Lions quarterback? So I'm going to set up the MALLER Sportsbook odds. These are not official odds. These are the MALLER Sportsbook odds. So the odds are minus 300. So this implies about a 75% chance, give or take, that Jared Goff will sign an extension. He's going into his lame duck season or lame lion season. He's got 1 year left on his contract. So I'm going to put my money on the table that Jared Goff gets an extension. So that's the way I'm betting on this, and here's why. Okay, my advice to Jared Goff, not that he needs my advice, but my advice would be this. Yeah, the old line we've heard all throughout it all, you got to strike while the iron's hot, but more importantly, you've got to take advantage of the goodwill. You got to take advantage of the Vataboys. You've got to overdose, because I know the Lions front office is overdosing on the dopamine hit from the Lions winning. So, therefore, right, if you're the front office of the Lions and you're overdosing on dopamine, you're all excited by all this Honolulu Blue love, and people are rhythmically chanting, Jared Goff, Jared Goff, like that, rhythmic chanting and all that, you take advantage of that. And I'd sign right away. I wouldn't even wait till the NFL draft. I'd sign an extension, get that money, and then there'll be buyer's remorse after that. Reminds you when Joe Flacco had the out-of-body experience in the playoffs for the Ravens and never again ever came close to that. But the Ravens had to pay him. They paid him. They gave him the money. They regretted it after they signed him because he stunk in comparison to what they thought they were getting. But Jared Goff, again, you take advantage of the front office overdosing on the dopamine, and you're on your way.